Hey there, listeners. This has been a really fun wine season of the Four Top to produce because every step of the way we have been supported by our friends at Erath Winery. And if you've been following along for the last couple of episodes, you know that we've been taking a break in the middle of each podcast to check in with Erath's third head winemaker ever. That's in 5 decades. That head winemaker is Leah Adent. And with the holidays coming up, I think you're going to love hearing about Leah's childhood memories of holidays in snowy Alaska, where she grew up. Now, if you've already purchased the Erath 3-pack, you're ahead of the curve. You can join us as we sip some Erath Resplendent Pinot Noir 2019 during this episode. And if you haven't, make sure to check it out. You can taste this wine with us because Erath has put together a special discounted 3-pack just for our listeners at erath.com/thefourtop. That's ERATH, erath.com/thefourtop. You can take advantage of this great 15% discount until the end of 2022. You can also pick up additional bottles at that discounted price. Be sure to use the promo code 4TOP. And now, cue the joke.
I really have only ever known one joke. I'm going to save Martin and tell my one joke, which happens to be about wine. There's a winemaker standing behind a table, and 2 people come up. He's pouring, tastes. They taste the wine, and they say, wow, this is a really good wine. Like, when should we drink this? And the winemaker says, well, if you're French, you should drink it right now because, you know, joie de vivre, and it tastes perfect right now. You should just drink it, buy a bottle or buy a case and drink it right now. And if you're British, you should wait 10 years. I mean, you know, all wine is better when it's older, and this will just be fantastic in 10 years. So don't buy a case, don't open it now, just drink it in 10 years. And if you're American, it doesn't matter. You already drank it.
Hello and welcome to the Four Top. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in the wine and food world. I am your host, Catherine Cole.
And I'm your host, Martin Reyes, Master of Wine. And on this episode, we are going to discuss, well, you know, one of those unicorn career paths, a wine writer. You know, I think everyone secretly dreams about being a professional wine writer. There's this romantic notion of what that is. But the wine writers that I know, most of them complain about how difficult it is to make a living as one.
That is for sure. Martin, I was chatting recently with a beverage publication editor, and he was totally kvetching to me. He said, every somm and wine retailer and importer he talks to fancies himself to be an undiscovered great wine writer. But then he was also saying that he really can't afford to pay the best journalists, the best wine writers, because the advertising income just isn't there to support serious journalism in wine anymore. And he was talking about how tough the business is. So it is the unicorn profession.
My hat's off to them. It is a tough business.
It sure is. I actually kind of got out of it myself. So I am really excited to hear from our guests, a couple of wine professionals who know this business inside and out. I hope they will tell us not only how to survive, but how to thrive in the cutthroat business of wine writing.
Indeed.
We are joined for a second time by Julia Coney. She's a contributing editor for VinePair and wine columnist for Sweet July magazine. She's a wine consultant for American Airlines in partnership with the James Beard Foundation. She's the founder of Black Wine Professionals, recipient of Wine Enthusiast's 2020 Social Visionary Award, and was named as one of wine's most inspiring people for 2022 by the Wine Industry Network. So good to have you back, Julia.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And Karen McNeil joins us as our second guest. She's the author of the perennial best-selling book, The Wine Bible. She's creator and editor of the digital newsletter Wine Speed, creator and chair emeritus of the Professional Wine Studies program at the Culinary Institute of America. She's an Emmy Award-winning host of the PBS series Wine, Food, and Friends with Karen McNeil. And, you know, she's a winner of practically every major wine award given in the English language, including a James Beard Award for Wine Professional of the Year. Karen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Martine and Catherine. Wonderful to be here.
And before we started taping, we were talking about how, I certainly learned everything I know from just reading the Wine Bible cover to cover when I was about 25 years old. Thank you for all you've done for the industry, Karen.
Oh, my pleasure. It was very hard for me to learn about wine. And in a way, it was the book I wished I had had.
Yeah, it's an essential book. Thank you, Karen.
Let's dig into the conversation. I'm so excited to talk about the business of wine writing with the two of you. And I have to admit, listeners to the Four Top often hear me complaining and lamenting about the fact that pay for wine journalism has declined since I got in the business. As media has become more fragmented, it has gone through some real growing pains. And Karen, I know you have experience with this as well. So tell me about your experience as a professional wine writer. And I'm wondering what the economic outlook is today for those who might be considering jumping into this field.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And it's always a pleasure to be on with Julia. I remember when I was starting out and had my apartment in New York City, which of course everyone knows is an expensive place to live. But I remember in my office, I had taped to the wall beside my desk all the articles I was working on, usually 7, 8, 9 at a time. This was in the late 70s and early 80s, the great era for magazines. And actually, you could make a living. I did as a wine writer. You did have to have like 7 gigs going at the same time. You had to be fast. There was no getting writer's block here, right? You had to really, as they say, pump it out. Hopefully it was still really good writing. But you could make a living. You might not be able to support a family of 4, but you could make a living for yourself. Today, presumably when I know a little bit more and am a better writer, in fact, today I could not make a living just by wine writing. I have old ledgers looking at the amount I was paid 30 years ago for magazine articles. I'm still paid the same amount today. So there are the reasons to write those articles still. And I still do, because when you're a writer at heart, you're a writer at heart. But the business of being in the writing business has changed perhaps irrevocably.
I see a difference between wine writing and wine criticism. I don't know if Karen sees the difference, but I think they're kind of two different things. So I think when we're talking media-wise, there may be a difference in how people see those things. I don't say I'm a wine critic. I say I am a wine writer. Like Eric Asimov and Esther Mobley, to me, are wine criticism in a different way.
I agree with Julia. I think this is a really important distinction to make, because critics have newsletters, either digital newsletters or written newsletters or both. And if you're a winery in the world, you sort of have to subscribe at $125 or whatever to see if your wine is reviewed. But Julia and I are in a different world. We're in the world of wine writing. And so we're paid by newspapers and magazines and to some extent now digital entities. And it's a whole different economic ballgame.
But I think there's a place for both. And I'm sure, like a lot of us in the business, we read both. We read the criticisms and we read wine writing. Like, I think of you, Karen, as having the first, in my opinion, wine newsletter with Wine Speed. Now there's a lot of newsletters, but you were one of the first to have Wine Speed.
Yeah, entirely. I mean, wine writing is not dead, but wine writing as a sole business may in fact be dead. What I think Julia and I both have are communication businesses. And those communication businesses can take an enormous number of forms that combine wine writing with giving presentations, with communicating in podcasts, and in every possible way that you can think about talking about wine. And so Wine writing, I suppose the best way to think about it is that in an accordion way, it's expanded into wine communications.
Mm-hmm. And I also think social media is a part of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Karen and Julie, I'm glad you both really crystallized something I think that may have been missing the way you said it, Julia. Wine critique, whether it's evaluating a wine, whether you apply a score to it or not, or whether you evaluate something around that wine or winery, and then writing about wine in a way that is more storytelling or education. There's always a bias, I think, right? But isn't necessarily judging the merits of that as much as sharing a story. So I'm thinking back if you listen to I think it's 103 episode with John and Eric, the one you both referenced, we had them on last season. And they argued a version of wine critique, wine criticism is dead, but it's evolved and morphed. And it's good to understand that if we use the analogy of like a tour guide, or rather, tourist attractions, some guides will just explain to you the story, why it's been historically important, right? Where others would say, no, I'm a critiquer of that town, and I'll tell you where the best restaurants are. Don't go here. This is much better than that tourist attraction. And so you have this sort of tone, right? And I'm grateful that at least for our audience, many of them are not wine professionals, to recognize the difference between wine writing as storytelling and wine critique as a story with some degree of opinion and evaluation of the quality or the experience, right? Is that helpful for us to use as a framework?
Martine, there's kind of an inherent irony in this way of thinking about the difference between criticism and writing, which is criticism is based on scoring, right? Largely, every critic uses scores.
Yeah.
Well, every writer comes to scores very reluctantly, because here you have slaved over the words, right? And you've given someone, by scoring, the opportunity to not read the words that you've laid awake at night trying to put a wine into words. And all four of us know that putting a wine into words is not easy. My heart goes out to all my fellow writers, Julia and everyone else, because here we are trying so hard to do something that's so difficult. And at the same time that we're doing that, the world of wine criticism is saying, you don't even need to read the words. Just look at these numbers. And that's a little, it's a bit demoralizing.
And I also think people still want to hear their story too. They
Definitely
want to know, like, is there a goat on the property? What did the winemaker do? And we can talk about in different regions, like the winemakers we enjoy talking about, and we're tasting their wines. But when we tell the story of perhaps visiting them or talking to them on the phone or even talking to them through Zoom, that's something that consumers still really enjoy. The question is now, it's just harder to get that story in front of them.
Okay, so then what's lost when a pathway of traditional wine writing and reporting is no longer possible? It's frustrating, right, to be in that industry. How does that play out?
In an effort to be a good communicator and needing to work in every possible medium, digital writing, everything you can think of, one of the difficult, or not difficult, but sad aspects of that is there's no one to question you. There's no one to say, how do you know that fact? As editors in the old days really did. And I'll give you this example from the first Wine Bible. So the first Wine Bible, I had an editor who had a brain of steel. She was so good. She was so tough. And in the Burgundy chapter, I had been talking about, the importance of the monks in Burgundy. And anyway, the written line was, in fact, the famous Burgundian Abbey of Cluny was the most famous cathedral in Europe until St. Peter's in Rome was built to surpass it. That was the line. And here was her red mark out to the side of the manuscript. Until St. Peter's in Rome was built to surpass it, or until St. Peter's in Rome was built and surpassed it. Mm-hmm. I had a 5,000-page manuscript with 10 red marks per page, asking those kinds of questions.
Oh, yeah.
And, I immediately cried, right? Because I was just like, I can't believe this, because I'd worked so hard. But Barbara Matier, that editor, made me such a good writer. She made me question everything. She made me fact check up, down, sideways, left and right until I really knew my stuff.
I am so there with you, Karen. We're talking about writers here, but the other thing that's lost as media is fragmented and it turns more to sort of self-published blog type formats is we lose those editors. Well, Julia, I used to be a contributing editor at a wine publication. I'm not anymore, but you are a contributing editor at VinePair.
Mm-hmm. I get edited. So
yeah, what's the process like?
Well, the process for me specifically is I kind of come up with like ideas of stories I want to write about, things that kind of interest me, things that I'm not seeing like written about, like maybe it's about an Eastern North Carolina winery and a Cuban food truck, right? And we go through like, okay, write the story, write the wine, but I still get edited. Like, so I'm still definitely fact checked. I'm still edited with that, which teaches even in personal writing, even just to me, I fact check myself, even if I'm writing an Instagram post, because I come from a background of as a writer. So I'm not going to put a fact out about any wine without fact checking myself. And I think that is because I also have editors, because I feel as a writer, I'm a better writer because I have an editor.
Yeah,
totally.
And so for that, I don't separate the wine writing as we all talk about social media and we all are on social media. To me, I still fact check my social. Is the name spelled correctly? Did this, winery open in the year I'm saying it opened? Did this wine come out the year I'm saying it? And I think that's also just the work of journalists. And you have to go within yourself and say, if I have to fact check myself, I'll do that. And so when I talk to young writers about the wine writing process, I'm like, it's still writing. And if you're coming to it, you can go take journalism classes, right? You can always be a better writer. It doesn't stop maybe because we see it diminishing. Because like Karen says, if you need to get the words out, the words have to come out. But you are held accountable, not only to what you're putting out, but to yourself. You don't want to put out anything that's not factual. So I always tell young writers who are coming in or people changing careers and they want to move into wine writing, I'm like, if you go in treating it as traditional journalism, you're way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
You're way ahead of the curve. If if you're starting writing something, do you have a lead? What is your pyramid telling you? Where does it go? Can you ask, does it start with that? Even if you're like me from an English background, is that the 5-topic paragraph essay, right? Are you fact checking yourself? That doesn't change just because the way you're presenting it changed.
Well, you know what though? I need to jump in with a dirty little secret that I want to share with importers who have all those great websites with the blogs and also wineries. Please, importers and wineries, check your own website, check it for accuracy, because, a lot of writers at midnight before their deadline are going to be checking those sites and saying, okay, they're trying to be conscientious. Okay, I did check that. It is true that they only ferment in Oak Foudre, or Botti or whatever.
Do you know, Catherine, that until about the year 2000, for major publishers, websites were not considered a valid part of fact checking?
No kidding, really?
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Actually.
Yeah.
They probably shouldn't be, but the speed of the publishing industry it's so funny. The whole history of technology is as new technologies are invented, it's presented that, it's going to make life easier for everyone. No, it just speeds up the timeline. And so books need to get out in 9 months flat, and articles, the folks who write for Eater, I know some of those folks, and I've been told some of them have to churn out 4 stories a day, so they can't call all of their sources. They have to rely on websites. So I know a lot of wine journalists these days do, and so I just wanted public service announcement.
Can I disagree with that a little bit?
Yeah.
In 1980, I was the first food and wine editor of USA Today. This was before there was really any substantial internet in terms of food and wine. I had on my desk what I considered like the killer Rolodexes. 10 of those huge, remember the old Rolodexes, right? You turned them around and they had, I mean, some people may not remember. But I'll remember.
Some people might not, yeah.
And every fact in a daily newspaper had to be determined, everything that you wrote had to be determined by an actual phone call. And so, yes, did you have to be fast? Yes, you did. But you can do that. That's how journalism operated for 100 years. Mm-hmm. The idea that you just have to rely on a website and you don't have time to actually call the winery and hear what the real story is, I think that's lazy, kind of. I really do. It used to happen that way,
but I think it's I think it's what people are doing. I think it's sad. But anyway, I agree with you,
Karen. I mean, this is a good time to ask because by the time this episode is out, your latest edition of that essential book, the Wine Bible, will have been published. How is the business of wine book publishing going?
One part of writing a big book is just being very solitary and knowing for the next 5 years you're going to make 6 cents an hour and you're going to write that big book. And as Julia was saying earlier, check yourself, hold yourself to a really high standard. When you're done, you kind of think you're done. But you're really not done because then you turn the binoculars around and now you're in the business of having to promote and sell and talk to people about your book because otherwise books can have the shelf life of yogurt. Book publishing has changed in this way that you are not only the writer of your book, but you have to be the biggest advocate of your book. So I'll just quickly say, what does that mean? Like, how are you the biggest advocate of your book? With the Wine Bible, after I hand the big book in, then I give about a month later, just because it's taken us a little bit longer to put together, what we call the White Book. The White Book is a big white binder of every top sommelier in the country, every top blogger in the country, every top wine writer in the country, every top grossing restaurant in the country for wine, every top gift shop in the country. And you hand this book, this was my idea years ago, because I realized that, oh gosh, your publisher, right? They know how to sell, but they don't know your industry. And so I gave them this book with the first Wine Bible, and people were like, oh my God, okay, we can now hit the ground running because they really, all of a sudden they had data, stuff, people to contact. And so with this third edition of the Wine Bible, our so-called White Book, the White Book is Julia's name is in there, right? All the PR people, the salespeople, they know who is important in the industry. And if you are a book writer, you have to be your own best business person in that regard because books don't really sell themselves.
So true.
Your book is awesome, and I love the fact that it's coming out, but I'm sure now it's bigger and bigger and heavier and heavier. And so I was just thinking, for those listeners who are out there, when you buy the Wine Bible, if the Wine Bible from Karen McNeil falls on your head, you only have your shelf to blame.
And that is the perfect timing, because it's time to take a little break and hear from our sponsor. Hey there, listeners. I am sitting in a very cozy brick tasting room, brick building here in Portland's Pearl District with Leah Adent, head winemaker at Erath Winery, which is our very, very generous sponsor for this wine season of the Foretop. Now, a little known fact, Leah, I used to share an office in one of the lofts upstairs in this building. And if you go across the street and look back, I don't know if you've seen it.
I have.
It's like the word wine is painted really faintly. I think it dates back to like the 1930s or something.
I think so too.
This building was like a wine distributor.
Yeah, it's a cool building.
Yeah.
It is a really cool spot.
So, folks, if you were in Portland looking for a place to sip some delicious Willamette Valley and other parts of Oregon wine, head on down to the Erath tasting room. It's so nice to be in these cozy environs, because the weather is turning right now, the leaves are falling, the holiday season is on the horizon, and I'm starting to think about Thanksgiving. So, Leah, tell us about Thanksgiving. What does it mean to you? I know you grew up in Alaska, right?
I did, yeah. So we typically did not do a turkey Thanksgiving. King crab season kind of kicks off right around the holiday season, and we would take full advantage of that. So king crab was our Thanksgiving main, which personally I think is much better than turkey, but I do love a good turkey. But yeah, it was obviously cold growing up in Alaska. Thanksgiving was truly winter. Even Halloween, I remember getting my snowsuit on and then putting my costume over it. Getting ready for ski season. I was a big skier growing up and still am. So, I love the winter. But yeah, the holidays was, I have a really small family, so it was just the four of us enjoying company and quiet evenings. And
I love that. I'm a pescatarian, so that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Well, we have some Pinot Noir here to taste.
All right.
What is the first Pinot Noir we're going to taste here?
So we have the 2019 Resplendent, which is typically our on-premise only Pinot Noir, although I know it's got an offer going right now. So it's made in a little burlier, a little more masculine style for Erath. It's still very much an Oregon Pinot Noir, but we choose specific sites and really specific clones to get a little bit darker color, a little bit fuller bodied style. We pick it just a tiny bit later, so a little bit more heat. Really just trying to capture, let's say, someone who's less familiar with Pinot Noir and came from the Cabernet or the Merlot or even the Syrah background, is ready to try something new or ready to find a red wine that isn't going to overwhelm a turkey, let's say.
I mean, I have to say, I was in California last week. This is not a big is not a big one. This is still an Oregon Pinot Noir.
Yes, it is.
It's still a delicate one, but I see what you mean. There's structure. There's something kind of brambly about it. Is there any stem inclusion? I wonder.
Typically not. No.
But there's some nice structure.
But yeah, there's separate barrels. There's separate clones. There's one clone that has the name 943 that is known as kind of the winemaker clone because it does not give any fruit on the vine, so it's extremely concentrated berries. So winemakers love it.
Yeah.
Growers do not. So there's a little bit of that in there, along with a couple warmer, darker sites for us.
And I can see how this would be very food friendly too.
Yeah, exactly. The oak is meant to be a little more generous, certainly not over the top. I think Erath has always tried to restrain the use of oak just to complement the wine. But it goes with a lot of different foods, so anything from white meat to dark meat to a cheese platter.
Yeah, it's elegant. And yet it has that strength to it as well. Well, listeners, I'm betting that you would like to taste this as well. And you can taste along with us. You can go to erath.com/theforetop to get a discount on a special 3-pack that includes this very wine, the Resplendent. I love that name. And you can get a 15% discount on that, as well as any bottle purchases you'd like to make. And that is good through December 31st of 2022. And that 3-pack includes the Quail Run Pinot Blanc, this Resplendent Pinot Noir 2019 that we are tasting, as well as the Single Vineyard Knight's Gambit Pinot Noir 2019. All right, well, we will hear more from Leah in upcoming episodes, and I cannot wait to continue this conversation. But for now, back to the show. Folks, let's transition. We've had sort of a depressing conversation about how miserable the wine media world is these days.
I don't think it's depressing.
But Julie, I was just gonna throw the conversation your way because I feel like
I'm glad Julie said that. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
I don't think it's depressing.
I feel like you haven't figured out. Teach us.
Okay, no, I don't think it's depressing. I think we also have to look at is what life is. That doesn't mean it's depressing. It is what it is, and so. I say is one of those things like the wine world is constantly reinventing itself, right?
Yes,
I remember talking to a friend, and I said this recently, that the wine world is Blockbuster in a Netflix world. My friend said that to me.
Oh, dear. And
what that is saying is like the world is evolving faster than I think the wine world and wine writing is used to. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean it's depressing. It just means we have to catch up faster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to realize, like Karen was saying about her list, and she has a white binder, right? She not only is she doing that, as well as like writing and editing a book, and people who are listening who want to write wine book, but she's also doing her own PR. So she's also a public relations, as well as the marketing team, as well as the writer and the editor and things like that. But what it allows us to do with social media as part of wine writing is we're reaching a different audience. We're reaching the same audience we want, but we're reaching newer people, right? So whereas, Catherine, you and I know volume 1 and 2 of the Wine Bible, now Karen is reaching people who knows 1, 2, and 3, or people who just coming into book 3. So with that being said, we just really have to, how are we engaging people to actually want to be inspired to read the wine writing we're writing? That may be newsletters. Karen has a newsletter, different newsletters, right? It may not be the traditional way, but the information is still getting out there. It's just being dispersed in a way we're not used to. It may not be magazines. It may not be newspapers the same way. I mean, but it could be that's coming, writing a caption to Instagram, maybe it's going to TikTok, maybe it's going to a newsletter. So I feel like if you want to write, you will figure out the way to get the words out. Because at your core, you're a writer. At your core, like, to me, like, I use social media as like an accent to the writing. I don't use it as a writing, but I don't think it's writing as the same way that I did years ago when I came into the business. I think there's more opportunity now to write, consult, advise, participate in communication. So if we're looking at wine writing, we also have to look at that as a form of communication instead of just words, because those words actually translate over because it's communication.
How do you make it work financially? How do you make, what's the balance of writing versus other activities? How much time do you put into, social media, and does that time pay off?
Well, yeah, it does. And I think we have to be honest and say it's changed, right? I don't think I'm not saying it's like so depressing and dire. I am just saying you have to also go with what is happening in the world, right? So if that means that you have a following on social media, how do you capture everybody that follows you, right? If somebody has 10,000 followers, but they don't have 5,000 emails, I would say maybe you need an email list. Because if Instagram decides to shut your account down or you get blocked and you don't have that, then now all those people, you've lost them.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you get them back? So instead of just trying to force it, and like, yes, there's still like VinePair, there's 750. There are really many outlets that people, even like Som TV has a vertical of like wine writing. They're out there, but I don't think we're looking at those the same way as we look at traditional media. And I think we also have to change because of that as well. So there's many outlets people can go to, and it just takes a little research. But maybe it's not on the shelf anymore. But I mean, you still have Food and Wine Magazine has a huge digital platform that focuses on wine. People could pitch those editors, and you have the different ways to get your name out and your words out. Is it a little more struggle? Yes, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying it's not as dire. I just think we have to like research it And before it was easy because there was newspapers everywhere that had it. I mean, the Washington Post just did away with the travel section. So that's huge. I mean, the print edition is gone. So what are all those travel writers doing? They're finding a way to change. And I hate to say the word because we used it so much during the pandemic. For the next few years, everyone is pivoting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Julia is bringing up something so important, which is that as a writer, you also have to be a good business person. And to some extent, historically, these were antithetical ideas, right? You sat in your quiet, beautiful room and you just wrote the best prose you could. You didn't have to be a business person.
And Karen, this is so resonating with me because I also have this same conversation with winemakers all the time where they're saying, I just thought I was going to make wine in my little cellar. I didn't realize I was going to have to be, a computer whiz and a social media expert and, be the master of MailChimp and, e-commerce. I'm like, hold my hand. We'll walk through Commerce 7 together, friend. And, they're kind of like, I just got into this to ferment some grapes. Like, what the heck?
You got to be on public facing, right, Catherine? No.
Yeah. I mean, but you're so right, Karen and Julia, both of you, that, a successful writer also has to be a quote unquote media personality, which can be uncomfortable for us. Those of us who, had that dream of, back in the day, it would have been the dream of like wearing a beret and smoking a cigarette and sitting at a cafe in Paris with our notebook. And that's what we were going to do. And I've certainly myself been criticized for putting myself out there on social media, while at the same time hearing from my editors and my publishers, we're not going to publish this. We're not going to hire you unless you have a certain number of followers. So get your shit together and put yourself out there. So it's like, it's like the devil and the angel, one on each shoulder. And it's tough.
I don't think numbers, this is me personally, I don't think numbers always correlate to quality. I don't necessarily believe that. I do think that people find the person in wine, like that they want to read, they want to follow. When people get an article or they read a book and they're coming to find that person, it just all kind of sinks in. And maybe I'm like the glasses always have full kind of person. But I do think now, like Karen's like, you have to look at it because at the end of the day, the wine world is also still a business. As much as emotion we have regarding wine, as much as like we want to sit at a beautiful view and talk and rap poetically about the nose on it and the bouquet and the taste, it's still a business. So wine writing is part of the business of wine. The more we continue to write about it, talk about it, communicate it, then we're helping the business of wine, which eventually helps us. Is it easy? No. I will say, because no wine writer I know is doing one job of wine writing. You're doing a lot of other things.
For those who are listening and thinking, okay, well, what's changed? Is wine criticism dead? Is wine writing dead? No, perhaps a version of the answer is you have to be a multidisciplinarian, understanding business, understanding your money in and out. Also understanding how to be in front of a camera, in front of, or being able to speak live to promote your book or to promote your article or to promote you, or maybe there's a controversy. You wrote something and you have to know how to defend yourself. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, this is much more, both commercially as well as marketing wise, a train that you're on. I'm reminded of this comment that somebody here everyone knows with Jancis Robinson mentioned since the pandemic, especially. She said, wow, people know what my house looks like now. And I asked her, I said, you also have had to learn how to jump off the page. People know your written word. They didn't really hear your commentary. So you have a different kind of power than you used to. You can say to us in front of a screen, gosh, here are some of my fears. Here are some of my, here's me being real. And the connection is enriched. And we see her and we see Karen and we see Julia not as just names on books, but real people with real dreams, real fears, much more than just simply being a wine writer.
And I have to jump in and say that was the beauty of Julia Child. however many decades ago.
Yeah.
When we all loved her cookbooks, and then she got on screen and was just, as we, famously dropping that chicken, oops,
Right.
just, and suddenly the world was charmed by cookbooks. And so, gosh, Martin, you're giving me hope, because what I'm hearing is that if you can make this kind of personal connection with your readers, there's a bit of enchantment with that. And maybe that will bring people back, just the way Julia Child brought people back to cookbooks, because she was just so engaging on screen.
When you're giving a personal presentation about wine, which is sort of the other side of the coin of writing, is teaching or giving presentations. If you can be vulnerable, if you have the courage to be vulnerable, it's the most powerful thing in the world. You give yourself pause by witnessing this phenomenon of the world's greatest beverage for the last 8,000 years. And the worst thing that you can do is, and the most untrue thing you can do, is to present yourself as someone who knows it all and just wants to blab on and on and on about everything you know, because it's not that way.
But those guys are so successful.
No.
Sorry.
But here's the thing. We're not trying to be those guys. It's kind of like,
exactly.
We're all on this call, right? And all of us love sparkling wine. Let's equate it to sparkling.
Yep.
The way we tell our sparkling story is very different. The way Karen's going to tell it in a California setting, maybe sunset. The way I talk about it being in the South. The way Martine talks about it in a different way. The way you, Catherine, talk about it in Port. We're still talking sparkling wine, champagne. We could get the same wine, 4 different stories.
Yeah, 4 different stories bubbling up,
and
right?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Bubbling, literally bubbling up. Right? And that's the beauty of wine writing, because those 4 stories are going to connect with 4 different people. And those 4 different people are going to tell some other people. And those other people find it. And they eventually find us, and they see us in that different way. And that's the beauty of wine writing. We're capturing it so differently, but also so personal, as Karen was saying, so vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And that makes people want to drink it because we're honest, right? So yes, you can say maybe that guy is successful who goes on and on, blabbering, as we might say, but the personal always connects more. So to me, that's successful.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
That's success. That's success.
Yeah. So well said. It is time to move on to our dessert course.
So my dessert wine to share is actually white and pink port. I just got back from Portugal, and I am drinking a lot of white and pink port. And instead of using tonic water, I am actually using sparkling wine to actually make my kind of like beverage, and it's very refreshing. So my dessert wine is a white or pink port, quote unquote, cocktail with sparkling wine.
It's like a Cure Royale, only the Portuguese version. I love that.
In Porto, they were doing pink port with tonic water and like a leaf of mint. So I actually did the same thing, and I tried it with Prosecco. I've done it with Cava.
Julia, that reminds me, I have a question. Why is vintage port the most romantic wine?
I don't know. Tell me, Martin.
Because it gets sedimental the more it opens up.
Oh, Martine, you are so bad.
Right. But Karen, what is your dessert course for tonight?
I want to turn people on to, if they haven't seen it, the Hulu series called Sweet Bitter.
What?
Which is, it reminds me of, in a sense, almost my own experience.
God, that book is so amazing. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yes. So this young woman moves from, I think, somewhere in the Midwest. It's a story of her going to work in a restaurant, and having this restaurant knows a lot about wine. They do a lot of grower champagne. Everybody's super sophisticated. And she has to learn the whole world of New York City restaurants, wine. It's very endearing and a big view into what really happens in restaurants.
And I remember reading the book. Sweet Bitter was a novel, I believe, before it was a series.
Yes.
So I definitely need to check that series out. Excellent. Thank you.
It's super fun. Yeah. Because we all remember, right? We all remember those very tender moments when we were just learning, when Macon, Meursault, Montagny. I mean, these were like, who knew, right? These were just, you were just like, oh my God, everything was completely confusing. And so it captures really well the tender moments.
But in the novel, I recall there was a lot of snorting coke and all the other fun stuff.
Definitely.
Okay, so that's in the series as well. Okay.
I guess it's time for me to do my dessert course. The listeners who've been following us, you know that it's been now, 20 episodes, and I rarely bring up a wine in the past 10, but I think I'm going to now, an actual wine. In honor of my business, which is WineWise, a distributor, and also in honor of the fact that Karen McNeil is a good friend of my partner, Hiram Simon. So the wine that it's something that we import, WineWise here in California. It may be available in other states, I don't know, but it's from a domain called Domaine Rouge Bleu, red blue, and it's a French-Austrian couple, Caroline Jones and Thomas Bertrand. She makes the wine, and he does pretty much everything else. And it's a little domain in between the famed appellations of Gigondas and Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And it's farmed organically. There's some biodynamic principles going on there. Fantastic. So they make a bunch of different wines. But what I'm drinking right now. It's probably what came to mind. It's their 2021 Dentelle Rosé. It's split between Carignan. I'll use the American accent. Carignan and Grenache. And deep-rooted vines, biodynamically farmed, the perfect proper ripeness, almost this improbably low alcohol level of 12%. And with the Carignan-based rosé being kind of relatively rare these days, it has this irresistible snap to go with this beautiful berry fruit. And, Southern Rhone rosé, just, I don't know if it gets much more refreshing and delicious than this. And the kicker is that it's in the teens. It's like $17, $18 at a grocery store or anywhere here in California. Wow. Just like, it's so refreshing, so steeped with ethical farming and small town charm between this Southern Rhone vibe. You can drink an entire bottle and still not be hungover enough the next day to take your kid to school.
Okay, my dessert course, really quickly, I'm going to turn my camera on. We record with our screen cameras off, but I'm going to turn mine on so I can show Martine what I'm drinking tonight. I don't know if you can see the label. Do you recognize that?
Oh, yes. It's a Philippa Pato.
Yes.
Wines, yes.
So, and Karen and I were talking before we started about how wonderful the sparkling wines from Bairrada in Portugal are. And I'm sure Julia was sipping some of those when she was over there. Philippa Pato, so her father, Luis Pato, is a kind of a famous winemaker in Portugal, champion of indigenous grape varieties on old ungrafted vines. And his daughter, Philippa, is a fantastic winemaker. Her labels are great because she calls her wines authentic wines without makeup. And so they would be classified as natural wines, but they're clean, they're delicious. And this one is really yummy the next day. It was delicious I was meeting with a colleague last night, and we had some of this. And then, if it sits half open in your fridge, it's even more delicious the next day. And I love sparkling wines that have that longevity. And this amazing female winemaker in Portugal, Philippa Pato.
That is She's awesome. They're almost here. They're almost here, coming into California again, and yeah,
nice.
I'm so excited.
She makes some delicious still wines. One is her white wine Carnosa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that wine.
It is so delicious. So if you can get your hands on her still wines, red and white, they are phenomenal.
Yeah, that's awesome, Catherine. It's like a double whammy of WineWise here in California. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, amazing, wonderful guests. You can find our guests online. You can find Karen McNeil online at KarenMcNeil.com.
And you can find don't mind the background noise. You can find Julia Coney online at juliaconey.com or blackwineprofessionals.com.
And where can we find you, Martin?
Oh, well, I guess you can find me at winewise.biz, W-I-N-E, if we know how to spell that, W-I-S-E, winewise.biz, and also at reyeswinegroup.com.
And you can find me at catherinecole.com. But why would you do that when you can go to theforetop.org, where you can find all of our social media handles, and you can get in touch with us, and you can tell us what you think about the state of wine writing. Signing out here from the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon.
And signing out from the Napa Valley, and Karen also from the Napa Valley. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye now.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Thank you all.
This has been the Four Top Podcast. Catherine Cole is our executive producer. Izzy Kramer is our senior producer. And I'm Keelan King, sound supervisor. We are also assisted by audio editor Michelle Richards, editorial assistant Nick Toole, and media assistant Ruby Welkovich. Please visit our website, theforetop.org, to learn more about us, listen to back episodes, reach out to us on social media, and purchase books written by our amazing panelists. And if you have not already subscribed to The Foretop on iTunes or Spotify, please do so and leave us a rating. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.